Shalom Aleichem, fellow Chaverim. This is Rabbi Ari Galandauer coming to you from Miami, Florida. I am presently a Rebbe at the Hebrew Academy of Greater Miami and also serving as the interim rabbi at the Young Israel of Greater Miami. And it is a pleasure to be able to share some divrei Torah with you for Shabbos, Parshat, Bamidbar. So as we open up Sefer Bamidbar and we begin the very first Parsha, the first thing that takes place is a census. As the pasuk says, "Su'u esroish kol adas b'nei Yisrael l'mishpachosam leveis avosam b'mispar shemos kol zachar l'gugolosam." You should count the congregation of the Jewish people by their families, by their fathers' households, by their number of names, every male according to their headquarters. Now, it's interesting that in this census taking place right now, one of the things that is included is the idea of b'mispar shemos, that you have to count the numbers by the names, which essentially means that every single person, when they're being counted this time, when they show up in front of Moshe and Aaron and whatnot, they are going to be counted by name. They have to say their name, son of their father. And the question is why? Why in the census over here, why is it so important that this time around there's going to be a census that includes their names as well? So I think we could find an approach to this question by looking at an incredible Nachlas Yosef on Megillas Rus. So one of the fascinating things that takes place in the end of Megillas Rus is before Boaz is able to go ahead and officially perform that Levirate type marriage of Yibum to Rus, he tells her that he has to make sure there's another Goel, there's somebody else who technically speaking has rights before him, and he has to just check and make sure to see if he wants to, because if this individual wants to, then he will let him do it. And otherwise, he will go ahead himself and he will perform the Levirate marriage. And so the pasuk tells us, Boaz Allah Hashar, Boaz goes up to the gate, Vayeshev Sham, and he's waiting there. Vehine HaGoel over, and eventually the Goel comes, Asher Diber Boaz, that Boaz we're referring to. Vayomer, and he says to him, Suru Shva Po Ploni Almoni, Vayasar Vayeshev. And he tells him, come over here and sit down, Ploni Almoni, and Ploni Almoni does so. And who is this individual that is Ploni Almoni? So Rashi right away tells us this is Tov. This is the other individual who is also a member of the greater family, who is technically ahead of Boaz in terms of having the right to perform this Levirate marriage, and that's who we're referring to. And so the commentaries wonder, and the Nachlas Yosef wonders, why is Tov, if we know what his name is, why is he being referred to as Ploni Almoni? Why don't we just say Shva Po Tov, and that he came and he sat down? Why does it hide his name, so to speak, and simply call him Ploni Almoni? And so the Nachlas Yosef says the following idea. He says, what was actually going on over here? Why didn't Tov want to perform the Levirate marriage? So as we all know, the Torah says that there are certain nations that are not allowed to marry into the Jewish people. And two of those nations are the nation of Ammon and Moab. And so we know that Ruth comes from the nation of Moab. And so what happens? Boaz goes and says, here's this wonderful lady, her name is Ruth, goes through the whole story. She's a convert from Moab, and she's from the she had married Elimelech's son and whatnot, and there's an opportunity to perform Yibum, etc., etc. And he hears the whole story. And at the end of the story, he says, listen, I would be willing to do it, except there's one problem. The Torah says, you cannot marry someone from Moab. So how am I supposed to marry her? Comes along Boaz, and Boaz says, no, that's not the case. It's not referring to the women. And so there's a whole machloka, so to speak, that breaks out over here. And ultimately, they gather a bezdin and whatnot, and the halacha is settled. That taka, the halacha is that while Shu lo yavoy Ammon b'kal Hashem, lo yavoy Moab b'kal Hashem, but that's referring to Ammon v'lo Ammonis and Moab v'lo Moavis. It's referring to the males and not to the females. The females are okay. However, when Tov hears this, he's not 100% certain. He's not 100% sure. Maybe he's being a machmir and whatnot. And so he passes on the deal, and he's not willing to go ahead and do it. And ultimately, we know Boaz doesn't. But again, why then is his name not being included in the Megillah? Why is he referred to as Ploni Almoni? After all, he seems to have a good reason to be of concern. If they're just, solidifying this halacha that it doesn't really apply to women, only to the men, and therefore it's okay, so you have to be the first person to jump at it, he's a machmir. He's like, you know what? You go ahead and do it, not me. And for that, we're taking out his name from the Megillah. So says the Nachlas Yosef like this. He says, we're approaching it from the wrong direction. We're assuming that everybody has a right to have their name in Tanakh. And so therefore, if your name doesn't end in Tanakh, you must have done something wrong. And so that's why it's being taken out. Says Lachas Joseph, no, you don't have your right to get your name in Tanakh. If your name ends up in Tanakh, it's because you did something extraordinary, something special. There's a specific reason that Hashem wants your name to be known for generations and generations. And that's how you end up. And if you don't do something extraordinary, if you didn't do something special, there's no particular purpose in having your name in there. It's not a punishment that your name isn't in there. You just didn't do anything special. And that's what happened with Tov. It's not that Tov didn't do anything wrong, that he did something wrong. It's just that he didn't do anything right. He didn't do anything extraordinary, anything special in this situation. And so that's why the Megillah refers to him by Ploni Almoni, because he didn't do anything in terms of living up to his name that would warrant it being brought into the Megillah. And perhaps we can understand, therefore, the importance in Bamidbar when we talk about the census, why it says the Mispar Shemos. The name of an individual is not just the title that they're to be called by. It represents their essence. It represents their purpose. And the idea is that we are in this world in order to fulfill our name. And perhaps in Pirkei Avos, when it says that there is the crown of Kehuna, and there's a crown of Torah, and there's a crown of Malchus, but Keser Shem Tov Ola Gabein. Crown of a good name is Ola Gabein, and perhaps it's Ola Gabein because that, at the end of the day, is the purpose of each individual, to be able to have a Keser Shem Tov. And how do you have a Keser Shem Tov? By fulfilling and living out your name. And so Sefer Bamidbar opens with a census and serves as a reminder for that generation and for all generations that part and parcel of being counted, of being se'u, of being lifted up, raised up, and being counted as an individual is to ultimately live out and fulfill our names. I wish you a good Shabbos and a Chag Sameach.